There are a ton of political podcasts on the internet. A lot of them lean to the left. A lot of them lean to the right. So predictable. But not this one, shooting you straight between the eyes with the truth. This is the Middle Ground Podcast. From Murfreesboro, Tennessee, for Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and Rutherford County, this is the Middle Ground Podcast, and this is Answer Fancher.
Hello out there, guys. What a week it has been. Thank you for tuning in, all of you out there on Facebook and Twitter and all the other things going on. Where do we begin? Well, you know, we got a new president this week. Some people were excited, some not so much. Some were expecting craziness, and I think that we avoided most of the craziness, which is a good thing. Craziness is not good. I like for things to be expected. But let's, where do we start? There's top of the show. I'm Gabriel Fancher. I live in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I like to talk politics. I am an English teacher with a finance and business background. I'm a real estate agent. And I do this podcast because I enjoy talking about politics so much that I created my own show for it. And there are a few things I wanted to talk about this week, just to let you guys know where we're going today. We're going to talk about inflation. We're going to talk about the minimum wage. We're going to talk about some of the things going on here in Rutherford County. And then we're going to talk about where do we go from here. And please feel free to like and comment on the show. I do get to see those things as they come through. Every now and then we bring in my mouse just died on me. We bring in people who would like to add to the show. You can either call in. I've got my cell phone here ready to go, or you can always, type your messages in and we'll discuss them as they come along. Good morning, Barb in Niagara. How are you? And Mr. Diggler, good to see you on Facebook there. This isn't part of the show, but what's up with all these people with fake Facebook accounts now? Like, do I need to get my own Facebook account? I mean, seriously. Earlier, so I mentioned some of the things that were the reason want to talk about inflation, minimum wage, and where we go from here is because this week has been a pretty crazy Facebook week. Really, lots of arguments going on there. Not so much on the inflation front, but more so on the minimum wage, and then on where we go from here and where we've been and things of that nature. But we'll go on and get started on inflation. The reason I want to talk about inflation is because I worry that it's something that no one's talking about. Number one, really, not a lot of people discussing it, and but I think that they will be. And I like to be a little bit ahead of the curve so that people that listen to my show can already be discussing it and be ready to add to the discussion when it comes up. So let's just start off. Anybody out there know exactly what inflation is? We got any A students that want to raise their hand and comment in there what inflation is? It's okay if you don't, but I'm used to it. Remember, I'm a high school teacher. I stare at a lot of blank faces every now and then. Inflation, by definition, well, look, first of all, let me issue a little bit of warning to you guys. I have a lot of friends who are way smarter than me about these issues. Number one, they may be listening. They're always quick to straighten me out on Facebook when I make a comment that's a little off the mark. And so I welcome those because I'm always learning, and I know just enough, in my opinion, to be dangerous. So if you're watching this show and I say something incorrect, please correct me. Please comment. Please let me know. So that way I can learn and I can share it with those that are watching. The issue is there are lots of different thoughts in economics, really, about inflation, whether it's good or bad and all in between, right? And so that's part of the problem. But inflation is the easiest way to explain it is it's the increasing of the money supply. in circulation, right? And so we are seeing the increase of money in our economy. And we have so for a long time. I was sharing some charts with some people today about the M1 and M2, and these are different terms that the Federal Reserve uses for defining money in the market. Yeah, money that's out there in our pockets, in our bank accounts, stuffed away in our mattresses. There's money out there. There's money that's locked away inside of banks. Money that's locked away for longer periods of time, and the Fed tries to rank all of these different things. What we're seeing right now is an explosion of M1 and M2, which happens to be the money that's in circulation. Let me pull up some. I don't have. I'm not. I'll have to post these later. These charts that I have that I pulled down, but they help me when I'm going to explain what's going on here. So the M1, the money stock has, I mean, like, I wish I could show you, like, you see that chart right there? That's what it's done. Look at that. It's huge. I mean, it's off the chart, a rise in the amount of money available. And so what does that mean? Well, it means that the government has created a lot of dollars all of a sudden. And so, and it's definitely all of a sudden. Think about all the different things that we've had go on during this pandemic. We've had a lot of different things, programs that the government has put in place to increase the money, so that way we don't, the government really worries about a deflationary economy and prices falling and things of that nature. The goal of the Federal Reserve and all the other banks around the world, is to have. Well, they have a dual mandate, right? Number one, they want a steady money supply. They want the prices to remain stable, but they also want employment to remain near full capacity. And so those two things run counter-cyclical to each other, just so you guys know, right? Stable money supply and near full employment. When jobs are not plentiful, what the Federal Reserve does is they kind of goose the economy by putting more money available into it. They do that normally by lowering the interest rates. You guys are familiar with that. We lower the interest rates. What happens when we lower the interest rates? Well, people go and buy things, right? They go and buy houses. They buy cars. What do you do when you see a zero interest loan? You might even buy a couch. I mean, there are things that people buy when they see that cheap money is available. The Federal Reserve does that to goose the economy, to get it going. During a more normalized period, they would try to raise rates to a normalized level, right? Since 2008, we have continued to lower our interest rates. We tried to raise them back up. The economy started to falter, and so we lowered them back down. And what they call that is that's called, oh, good night. I feel like I'm in one of my finance courses and I've forgotten the answer. But that is called it's a trap, right? Like where you can't raise rates back up. Once you've lowered them to a certain lower level, you can't raise it. If someone would comment, and please bail me out here and give me an answer there, that'd be great. But that's where I feel like we have found ourselves. We're at a point where it is nearly impossible to raise rates back up. Japan found itself there, still there, right? Near zero, right? Near the zero bound, and can't raise rates up anymore. The other issue is once you're down to this low level, is what happens when the economy falters now? What do you do to goose rates, right? What do you do to, because that tool has been used up. You're at the zero bound. You can go to negative rates. People don't believe that we will, but it's a possibility. And so it's a tool that's in the toolbox. Hey, Marquisha, how are you? So there's that tool is in the toolbox, but the other thing that we can do is we can use quantitative easing, and that's where we put more money into the market, right? And so that's what we're seeing. And then there's also the third thing is where the federal government can goose the economy by, sending out checks to people, right? The stimulus programs that are out there. George Bush did it, with during 2001, he sent those tax rebates out to everyone. That goosed the economy to get us going out of 9/11, things of that nature. We have received some payments from the government now. Now we're up to twice. There's talk of a third payment coming. And so when you do that, you put money into the economy and we take off. Jeremy Warren has a question. Why not go to negative rates since we are printing money we don't have? Great question, Jeremy. Let's see. So number one, let's just start by talking about his question, right? He says, why not? So negative rates are where, the bank would charge you money to hold it for you, right? Or you would pay money if you borrow money. The liquidity trap. That's right. Thank you, Michael. Sorry. See, I told you I had much smarter friends than me out there, which is great. I love it. Let's see. So negative rates are that, and so negative rates. Well, the issue with negative rates is people wouldn't want to put money in the bank anymore, and they may just stick it in the mattress. So that's one of the reasons why we don't like negative rates. The other part of his question was, we are printing money we don't have. And I don't know, it is money we have because we printed it, right? The issue is the luxury of being the United States is that we are able to issue debt in our own currency, right? And so we issue this debt and we promise that we're going to pay it back. So everybody worries about China and how much debt they hold of ours and things like that. And all around the world, they hold U.S. debt, the promise to pay things back in the future, right, with dollars. The beauty of our situation is that at any moment, we can print these dollars and put them on a big boat and send them over to China, and we can be instantly out of debt. Paul Krugman talked about that. He was like, all Barack Obama has to do to solve the fiscal problem here, walk over to the Treasury, get them to print a $1 trillion coin, walk over to the Federal Reserve and pay off all the debt. No big deal. Well, no big deal, sort of, right? Again, you'd have this issue of all this money would be available in the market. And when we have all this money available in the market, what we see are prices rise, right? And you don't want, so there are some people who don't want prices to rise at all, right? They want the money supply to be stable and very fixed. And so that way, resources inside the economy can be properly allocated to where they should be so that it gets the most return for that money, right? There are others like Milton Friedman who believe that what you want to do is you want to have the inflation needs to be predictable. You need to know, for planning processes as a business, as a consumer, what you can expect inflation to be. He didn't seem to be too concerned about inflation. He liked the ability of the Federal Reserve to be able to goose the economy when needed, to be able to pull off the gas when needed. I think Milton really, really enjoyed that ability and felt that, the smart people could get in a room and figure these things out. Whereas Ludwig von Mises and others didn't trust those smart people to always know exactly what was going on because the economy is so darn complicated. There are just so many levers. It's like a computer with thousands and thousands of buttons, and it's just not easy for someone to be smart enough to know exactly what the economy needs. And so what we see is when we do lower these interest rates, as I circle back here to where I was talking about earlier, the reason you lower interest rates, what we see is when we lower these interest rates, it changes how the market responds. People then take that money and they go and they buy things they don't need, right? Maybe you didn't need that new couch, but it was so beautiful. And at 0% interest, I can afford it because I put it on monthly payments and I can afford it. I can afford a house bigger than what I normally would need because the interest payments are so low. And so my payment is so low and I'm stretching this out over 30 years that I can afford it. And so you see housing prices rise, right? You see products and goods rise. Look at what low interest rates have done for the price of cars. Yes, we get a lot more in our cars. They're far safer, but look at the price that that has happened in the United States of cars, it continues to rise. I think part of that reason is because we have this low interest rate environment that has continued to be here for a very long time. And we seem to be stuck, like Michael said, in the liquidity trap where we can't get out of this situation. So that's inflation. So the issue here, that misallocation of resources, like Milton said, he felt that as long as it's predictable, then you're going to be fine. When it becomes unpredictable, that's when you get into trouble. And that's where I fear that we are headed, is to the unpredictable point, because we've had such a dramatic increase in the money supply, such a dramatic increase of government spending, that I believe it's going to lead to unpredictable inflation. And what does that mean exactly? What's unpredictable inflation? Well, the real worry, what a lot of people worry about, is that you get the not only a higher rate of inflation, but you could eventually get to the point where you have really high rates of inflation called hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is where prices change daily. It's where you get $1 trillion bills and things of that nature. Some examples of hyperinflation that have occurred are, one happened here in the United States, the Continental. Before the US dollar, there was the Continental, and it lost its value because the government printed too many Continentals, and all of a sudden you need more and more Continentals to buy a loaf of bread. The most recent example of a major economy would be in Germany. I believe it's around 1923, I believe, when the mark lost its ability to purchase. Was 2008 downturn hyperinflation? Ooh, that's a good question. So Jeremy Warren, for those of you that aren't on Facebook, just asked the question. He said, was 2008 downturn hyperinflation? I don't think so. In 2008, in my opinion, what the Federal Reserve saw was massive amount of deflation, because people were pulling cash out of the market and no longer exchanging it. You had banks that were saying, I'm not going to pay that bill. I'm going to hold on to these dollars and see what happens. And so you had the entire system freeze up. So much of our business is, especially in 2008 and now, takes place in these short-term money market accounts, right? And those money market accounts in 2008 broke the buck. Should have been worth $1 was no longer worth $1, because people were not willing to take on the risk, because they didn't know who was going to pay their bills. And so you had this constant, like, everyone, the market seized up. The government stepped in 08 and said, we're going to back all of those things. All of those money markets now have the full faith and credit of the government behind it. And so it got the system moving again. It was another power that the federal government stepped in. And so it caused some problems, as far as like when you gave the tool, another tool, to those that are in charge of our money. Hegner says, go back to the Weimar Republic as a better example. I agree. So Weimar Republic, that's Germany, for those of you at home. It took place as Jason just said, Facebook is the place to watch this show, evidently, 21 and 23. So you had Germany printing a lot of money. Now, the great thing is, for the Germans at the time, was at first it seemed like everything was great, because you had people from all over the world bringing marks to Germany and buying up all their stuff. They'd buy their art. They bought their pianos. They bought their wheelbarrows. They bought everything. All these marks came home. And so Mises talks about how to get to the level of inflation where you reach hyperinflation, people have to decide that it's better to hold on to things than it is to hold on to the unit of currency, whether that be the mark as in 23 or the dollar today. People decide that if I don't spend my money right now, it's going to cost me more in the future. And so you have this speeding up of money going to work. Think about what housing prices are doing in Middle Tennessee, right? People, even some of the most conservative real estate investors right now that I know have almost given in to the fact that not the fact, to the opinion that housing prices are just going to continue to rise. And so, and that is when you see the most conservative of those investors give into that, that's a worrisome point for me as an economist, as a amateur economist watching this. But what happened in Germany was they print all this money, they sent it all over the world, and then it all came back home. And as it came home, prices began to rise. And then they began to rise faster and faster and faster. And because they had printed so much, they couldn't stop it. And once it gets out of control, because it's hard to get inflation going, number one. So the Federal Reserve has been trying to get inflation going for a while. Their stated goal is 2%. They can't seem to find it. Right. Part of that, in my opinion, is that they're not measuring it properly, but that's a whole nother story for another day. But once you because people are used to a stable currency in the U.S., we're just used to it. We've had it ingrained into our head that it's a stable currency, and it has been for a long time. So much so that the world trusts us to issue our own debt in our own currency. Right. And so because they trust that we're not going to just fire up the printing press, start printing those dollars out, and they'll take all our money. Maybe we have reached a point where the world is starting to not trust us as much. And so what that would mean for us would mean higher rates of interest, right? Because we keep interest rates low because the world comes and buys our debt, things of that nature. And so as it moves inversely, prices and interest rates and for bonds. And so if people don't want to buy your debt, you have to lower the price. That means the interest rates have to rise. And so it's possible that we're reaching that point where the world is no longer trusting us as much. And so therefore we could have higher rates of interest in the future. What does that mean for normal people? Well, that means higher interest rates for when you go to buy a house, or higher interest rates when you go to buy a car or buy a washer and dryer if you're just starting off a family. And their higher interest rates would likely mean a slower economy. A slower economy would likely mean less employment. Less employment means less money available in the economy. And so you see how this cycle goes the wrong direction very quickly. And so that's a real problem. Another way that so that we talked about inflation that the government can cause through, as Milton Friedman, where's my book on that? I set it down somewhere. I was trying to read through some of the stuff. He called it, there's a word for it. Oh well. Anyway, Milton Friedman talked about how the government would do these things with the money, and it makes bigger problems, totally bigger problems. So we've discussed that as best we can for one show, right? Like that deserves, you can study inflation and monetary policy for years and years, and there'll still be people that come out on different rationales for it. Unless there's more questions that pop up, I'm going to move on because there's other ways that inflation gets going. Another way that you can cause inflation is by making things more expensive to create, right? Think about it. If you raise for instance, the minimum wage, if you raise the minimum wage up, what do you think that will do to the average price of hamburgers? Anybody? Well, I don't think it takes too long to figure out that if you're having to pay your employees more, you can't sell a 99-cent hamburger anymore. Or if you can, you're going to have to make it much smaller. So it's possible there still will be 99-cent burgers, just expect them to be White Castle size or smaller would be my guess, right? And so that, the talk right now, and it seems to be on the table, and it's definitely something that the Democrats and those on the left, because I don't like to put people all in one party just because you're on the left side there. Just because you're progressive doesn't automatically mean that you are a Democrat. But nonetheless, the left is pushing for a higher minimum wage, and many on the right, lots of Republicans, seem to be in agreement that the minimum wage needs to rise. And I am of the opposite opinion on that. We had a lot of people on Facebook had lots and lots of opinions about minimum wage because I posted something about it. And it could have been because I had Kamala's picture in the post that got people excited. She seems to fire people up for lots of reasons. We'll address those in a minute. But right now, so I posted the thing about the $15 minimum wage and what that would mean. And I'm not an expert, but isn't Venezuela the most recent example of hyperinflation? Yes, Jeremy, it is the most recent, but Venezuela is not a major economy, so that's why I didn't bring it up. But Jeremy Warren, a mortgage guy, so he's dealing with money all the time and probably knows this subject way better than me. He mentioned that Venezuela was the most recent example of hyperinflation, and it is. It was so bad there that people were just throwing money out in the streets. It was just so worthless you could sweep it up, and it didn't matter anymore. So a lot of people. So what was interesting about what I think is most interesting about Venezuela, and the reason it does deserve a discussion, Jeremy, is the economists lost the ability to measure things, because normally we measure our output, our productivity. Everything is measured in the currency that people use. And in that situation, the currency was changing in value so fast, right? Like, you couldn't keep your money you couldn't keep your Venezuela, whatever they use, probably a peso or something along those lines. You couldn't hold your currency for that long. What people were doing was they would buy dollars once they got paid. Right when they got paid, you'd buy your dollars, and then when you go to shop, you'd change them over. And as soon as you got done, whatever change you had left over, you would switch back into dollars. And so, you had that going on. So it was impossible to measure the productivity really in that area. What they started doing was measuring it in eggs and in calories and things of that nature to try to understand what was going on. And so what you saw was in Venezuela, people lost a lot of weight. People starved to death. And so it's a modern economy that suffered from hyperinflation. And that's why it's a great example, right? The issue is, in my opinion, that makes it different than the Weimar Republic and the Continental here in the United States, and then France had a time with hyperinflation as well, is that it's not a major economy. And so hyperinflation takes place. If hyperinflation were to take place here, we're going to catch the this awful disease, but the rest of the world is going to catch it too. And so it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the world decides to deal with us due to that. What was that due to monetary or fiscal policy? I think so. Michael Hegner on YouTube says, was that due to monetary or fiscal policy? And I would probably guess with Chavez, it was a little bit of both, right? Because he had his hands on both levers, the fiscal side, as far as the government goes, and his ability. He owned most of the property and most of the productive means in there because he's communist, right? And also he controlled the monetary side, so they produced, they got away with a lot, right? Because he was just printing money. And remember, it takes a while for inflation to take hold. People just don't naturally jump to it. They assume whatever happened yesterday is going to happen today, right? And so once inflation takes hold, then it's hard to get rid of. And Paul Volcker is the last time we had inflation get loose, so to speak, was in the 70s and in the 80s here in the United States. And Volcker, what he did was he raised interest rates to a really high level, 19%, I believe it was, in 81, to break the back of inflation, right? But he also broke the back of our economy, right? And I don't know if anyone has the gumption or the strength of character to do that. I mean, he took a beating in the Wall Street Journal when that was going on. Can you imagine what would happen nowadays? Like, Twitter would be on fire if Janet Yellen's in charge of the Treasury now. Whoever we end up with, it feels like we're just constantly changing these people that are in charge of our monetary policy. Whoever we put in charge of that, can you imagine the type of onslaught that they would receive if if they had to raise interest rates to such a high level to break the backs of it. The way to deal with inflation, I love this. This is one of those Milton Friedman quotes that I just love, is high living, right? And he says that's how you deal with inflation, is you just spend your money quickly, no longer need to save. And so that's why Austrians really have a problem with an inflationary policy, is because it rewards people who spend money freely and it punishes those who save. And it's something that we don't really talk about. So if you've saved money, if you've done things right, didn't live on borrowed money, right, and you've done everything right, like everything, if you follow Dave Ramsey to a T, inflation is your enemy. It is your enemy for sure. And so because what it means is that the dollars you save have lost value over time. They could have bought you this much goods 10 years ago, and now they buy you this much goods today, and then in the future they're going to buy you this much goods. You see how there's a slope going the wrong direction there if you're the guy that's saving money. But if you're the guy that borrows money, like the federal government, you borrow money and buy goods here, right? You pay them back over time, and so they're worth this down at the end of that term. And so it's a great deal for a debtor, right? And our largest debtor, let's be honest, is the federal government. So you can see why they are in favor of inflation and want to make sure they get it going. A way to get it going is by raising what people get paid, because when you raise the cost of inputs, you're going to raise prices on that end, but you're also going to put more money into the economy that they could therefore spend. But the problem with inflation, the problem with the minimum wage, so I'm trying to move past, although these things are so intertwined, but the problem with the minimum wage, if you raise it above what someone is worth, is no longer will employers employ them. They will go and find robots to do the work, right? They will ship jobs overseas. There's been talk that fast food restaurants will do this first. And one of the ways that they'll do this is when you drive up to the window to ask for place your order, it's not the window, it's the sign, the big sign. You drive up. You might one day very soon, if they raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, when you talk to that computer, well, it won't be a computer. When you talk, it could be because AI is getting great too. But you could be talking to someone in a foreign country who makes a much lower wage, right? Because all they're doing is keying in what it is, and you can have, you're going to accept a credit card, and it makes payment way easier and things of that nature. But imagine you drive up to Starbucks and you go, "Hey, I'd like my, frothy whatever thing." Someone in India takes that order and then types it into the computer for you. It's totally possible. It'd be a way of dealing with this higher minimum wage if you bump it up. Another way is by having less people work there. And so the ones that keep their jobs, who get this bump in pay, right, they're going to have to work harder to justify it. And so that means that if you have less skills, less hard work, less work ethic, less experience, things of that nature, that means you're going to lose your job. Like, seriously, we can expect unemployment to rise by, I don't know how much. It's hard to predict how much. And one of my old professors reached out to me on this because he was like, my professors just love to give me a hard time, and I love it. But a lot of my friends are like, "Man, that dude just kicked you in the, anywhere." But anyway, so when you raise the minimum wage, not only is it going to make it more difficult on employers to pay people this, when you raise the minimum wage, it makes it more difficult on them to pay their employees, right? Because they have to pay them more. So therefore they're going to have to cut back. But it also brings people who are not working into the workforce. They're like, I am not going to take a job at $7.25 an hour. But if you raise that up to $15 an hour, I will come off the sidelines. I will give up sitting around the house receiving, whatever benefits or doing nothing or whatever, driving Uber, things of that nature. I will go and I'll get a regular job at $15 an hour. And so because unemployment does not just measure it measures the people looking for jobs. It doesn't measure those without jobs, right? It measures those that are actively looking for employment. And so when you raise the price that someone's going to get paid, more people are willing to work, and therefore the unemployment number rises. We saw this when Barack Obama raised the minimum wage. And when Joe Biden raises the minimum wage, we will see it again. You're going to see the number of people willing to work is going to rise. You're going to see unemployment rise with that. And so, and then also you're going to see prices rise. And, determining how that shakes out, not easy to do. Really not easy to do, not easy to calculate, not easy to foresee. Because again, remember at the very beginning of this conversation, I talked about how our economy is like a computer with thousands upon thousands of buttons. It's very difficult for us to understand the valuation that we should place upon things. And therefore, it's very easy for us to misallocate our economic resources because of the unknowns, because of you just don't know. Jeremy Warren has a question out there. He says, is inflation your enemy if you are investing in the stock market? It can be, but generally inflation is not as big of a problem for the stock market in general, in my opinion, because companies can raise their prices to keep up with inflation. And so therefore you would expect your returns to come back to you in stocks. And so I've got a chart that I'll be sharing with you guys after the show that shows that how we have increased the money supply also has increased the value of the stock market. And so that would lead right in to say that a way to protect your investments from inflation is to own stocks, right? And some people argue that's why because like companies just charge higher prices, and so they make more money, and so their values can rise with the inflation. And so guys like Warren Buffett argue that stocks are the only investment you can have to defend against inflation. There are guys like Peter Schiff who thinks gold is your only route to save yourself from inflation. There are younger guys who argue that Bitcoin is the way to save yourself from inflation. I believe that the best investment policy is diversification, because we don't know where, like, again, I lean back toward we don't know enough about the economy to know where to put our money. Property, another good place to defend yourself. And I would include that as part of your diversification model. Michael on YouTube says property would be a good thing. Well, he says property ? And yes, anything like wheelbarrows are going to go up in value eventually, right? So the issue really that I have with this expansionary monetary policy, with the expansion of the minimum wage, is number one, we don't know how it's going to work out. We don't know who is going to gain the most and who is going to not gain the most, right? Because there's going to be winners and losers when you put your thumb on the scale. There's going to be. So, but there are a lot of people out there that are against a trickle down economy. My friend Jason is very much an opponent of trickle down economics, and I am too at a point. But my issue with trickle down economics has to do more with the monetary policy. And that's because when you increase monetary policy, when you increase the amount of dollars in the system through like things like quantitative easing, or when you lower interest rates, the people that are able to take advantage of it first get the dollars first. Those dollars have a greater value than the dollars that trickle down to the bottom because of inflation. So as those dollars trickle down through the economy and they finally end up in the hands of normal people, those dollars are worth less than they were to the guys in Wall Street. Does that make sense? You see what I'm saying? So they get them first and they're able to do what they want to do with them. And then as they trickle down, because I believe that trickle down economics works. I do believe that if you give money to people, they're going to put it in the economy and it's going to trickle down, right? The issue I have with it is that the value of those dollars is lost over time. And so it takes time for things to trickle down. And so that's that. So I'm against it, but I'm also sometimes for it, because I do believe that money in the hands of people is the best thing for the economy, because only you and I know how best to spend the money to get the most for you and I, right? The government does not know what is best for me. They do not know my own personal preferences. And so therefore they're not, a lot of times the government will take on the role of parent And that can be good and that can be bad. But for me to, I'm going to know at the margin what I think is best, what's going to bring me the most happiness. I'll know when I spend that dollar what will bring me the most happiness for it. And I can make my own decisions rather than have the government make them. And so that's my feeling on that. I do feel like, so my students very excited about a $15 minimum wage. I mean, very, very excited. And I get it. If you're working for $8 an hour right now in Murfreesboro, then I think that the idea of getting a big pay bump would sounds really, really good. Teachers are excited right now because in Nashville, they're talking about giving teachers a 4% increase in income. And so as a teacher, I'm like, yeah, that sounds great, but I also know that inflation's coming, right? And the education system it's an interesting beast. We'll have to talk about that. Let me stick on minimum wage here. So minimum wage gets increased. My students are excited. I try to explain to them that, one of my former professors at Western, he told me that minimum wage does not take place for students. So you can pay a student less than minimum wage. You can also pay someone less if they're brand new into the economy. And there's a certain number of days. I can't remember exactly. I have to look that up and share that. But a certain number of days where you can pay someone less than minimum wage as well. So there are workarounds. And also, if you're a smaller business, you can also work around it. But the prevailing idea is people won't work for less than the minimum wage. So therefore, you're going to have to pay them. And you see that here in Murfreesboro, right? The minimum wage is $7.25, I think, right now. But nobody's taking a job at that minimum wage right now. No one, unless they absolutely have to. People are working for $8, $9. Amazon's hiring constantly. They're paying near 15. There are healthcare companies that are paying people $9 or $10. The minimum wage is rarely being used in Murfreesboro because we have such an expansive economy that people are really desiring it. And so that keeps us from being on it. The issue I have with minimum wage, with raising minimum wage, not only do I feel that it'll hurt students and those with the poorest among us with the least amount of skills, I think it will hurt them the most. I also think that it's going to hurt those in the middle that don't get the pay bump, right? They're going to have to stay at the same while people below them with less skills are making nearly as much money. I think it's going to hurt them. But I also think that it's going to decimate our rural communities, totally ruin them, right? Because a lot of companies take Tyson, for instance, here in Murfreesboro. If you drive south down to Shelbyville, you're going to run it. There's a chicken company down there called Tyson, and they pay their workers a small amount, right? But houses are cheaper in Shelbyville. If you drive up the road to where I'm from, up in the middle of Kentucky, they pay people less because houses are cheaper there, right? My brother bought a house a few years ago for around $30,000. You can buy houses there for much, much less than you can buy them here. And so therefore, a flat minimum wage that blankets across the country is not going to be good. It's just not going to be good for a lot of people. There will be some winners. There are always some winners, but there's going to be a lot of losers. But if you're in the business of helping people, if you're in the government and you're like one of your main goals is to help people, right? You're like, I'm with the government and I'm here to help you, which Ronald Reagan said some of the scariest words you'll ever hear. You're going to have a lot of people to help after you raise that minimum wage. And so that's what a lot of people are excited about. Is that, we'll raise the minimum wage. That's going to help some people. Then we'll create other programs to help other people. Food stamps and WIC and things that has already been increased. I make $4,500 less a year in 2021 than I made in 2008. Wow. Jason on Facebook just said I make $4,500 less a year in 2021 than I did in 2008. That's worth diving into, worth discussing. It's interesting. I wonder why. Any idea why? That's going to change next month finally, but man, wages have been stagnant. Wages have been stagnant, right? There's lots of reasons why wages have been stagnant through the years. Part of the reason, in my opinion, that wages have been stagnant is because there's plenty of labor available. And so companies are becoming more productive and using less people to do greater things, right? Think about how few employees it takes to run run Facebook. It takes less employees to run Facebook than it did Ford when Ford was valued what Facebook's valued. So our economy is changing to more of this internet idea based economy, and so therefore less people are getting some of the money. So I don't know that it's a very big issue. Stagnant wages. I don't think raising minimum wage is how we fix those issues. Japan has issued some laws to try to tap down on CEO pay. Right. So it's a formula that they use, like the top of the company, the top employees can only get paid a certain amount. And then it affects your taxes that you pay and things of that nature to try to boost up the bottom. It's just very, very, it's a tough nut to crack, in my opinion. Let's see here. So I think I've covered minimum wage a little bit, that there's going to be some winners and losers. Michael Hegner on YouTube was asking Jason, did you work the same amount of hours? I bet he did. I bet he worked a full time in 08 and before and after that. So I've been going a while here. There's some things that happened in Murfreesboro. In Murfreesboro, we just hired a new superintendent for Murfreesboro City Schools, Trey Duke. Super, fantastic guy. I know because one of my daughters goes to his former elementary school at Salem, and the guy is he runs a tight machine. People love working for him, and so I wish him the best of luck as he runs the school system here in Murfreesboro. I am one that believes that we need to bring these two school systems together. We don't need a Murfreesboro and a Rutherford County school system. I personally think that we need to bring those together for one school system, cut out some of the administrative costs and things of that nature that I see as waste. I think that we can bring those together and save money, and that would be good for taxpayers, in my opinion. But getting to that point is going to take a while for sure. Let's see. At the state, they had a special session brought together for education. I'm hoping, and I know it's not going to happen, but I'm hoping that our representatives are fighting like hell to fix the BEP formula. BEP stands for something that I can't remember off the top of my head. I should write these notes down beforehand and not just go with off the cuff. But basically, the BEP formula makes it where Rutherford County has to fund a certain percentage of the education, and less state dollars and federal dollars help fund our education. And so therefore, when if the state says we're going to give 4% raise to teachers, Rutherford County has to somehow come up with that money to get there because not all that money is coming from the state or from the federal level. And so that makes it tough. Other counties that are more right-sized do not have to struggle with it as much. And so that makes it tougher on Rutherford County that's experiencing such high growth. Our BEP formula is from way back. I doubt they're willing to take on any tough issues. One of the drawbacks to having supermajorities is that I really feel like they don't take on any tough issues, and we don't reach any form of compromise on that. The teachers unions are trying to get higher raises and more protection and more money for schools out of the state. The teachers unions here have no teeth. They're the dog that just barks, and our elected representatives seem to know that. And so that's unfortunate. And so I'm not really, as a teacher. Well, look, I think unions have a place. If you watch the movie Fist with Sylvester Stallone, you'll learn a lot about how unions became powerful. The TEA is a joke, Jason says on Facebook, and calling something a joke is a bit strong. But I know this: they have no teeth. That's for sure. And so. And that's unfortunate for a teacher. It could be unfortunate for students too, because unions fight for teachers, but they're also fighting for students. And so, I don't know. There's definitely a balancing act between there. And so, and as far as unions go ahead, Jason, tell me about it. Unions in general have lost a lot of teeth through the years. I think that the leaders of the unions play a little too much golf with the CEOs. And so that's a problem. I think our union leadership needs a little bit more middle class working class leaders, really. And so you forget what it's like to be at the bottom when you're at the top. And you see that. And so when you look at the unions of the past, when they were really willing to fight for things, oftentimes those leaders had a greater understanding of what it was like to be at the bottom. And until we get that kind of leadership at the top, you're not going to see unions grow in strength or grow in numbers, because why bother joining, right? I mean, like, to join the TEA is going to cost me money, and I don't see any benefit in it. They provide some insurance to protect you, if you were to be sued while teaching, which, that there's something to be said about that, but I think you could buy that on your own. And so I don't know. I just, I'm disappointed in the leadership personally. And so until I see better leadership, you're not going to get me fired up for joining. And so if I was in charge, you in the state of Tennessee, you cannot strike as a teacher. And so there goes some teeth right out, right? But there are some things that you can do. You can, it's going to take hardball if you're going to get some rights back. It's going to take someone with the leadership and with the stones to be able to push through and make that happen. And no one really has that. And there's not a lot of, there's just not a lot of at the lower level. Those of us at the bottom, not a lot of us are willing to fight for higher pay either. And until you see people at the bottom that are willing to be like, I'm fighting mad and I'm willing to stand up to get a higher wage, you're just not going to have, it takes leadership saying, hey, I'm going to lead you guys through this and we're going to see it to the other side. Just stick with me. And then you need people at the bottom saying, hell yeah, I'm sticking with that guy. And so when you get those two things going, then all of a sudden you got some power and you can start getting some stuff back, right? That the unions have given away through the years. And you definitely have seen that in Tennessee. A lot of power given away. Let's see. And so speaking of anger and power and things of that nature, you're seeing a lot of that anger bubble up on Facebook. We're reaching a point where people can't talk anymore. It's hard to debate issues. I mentioned something on my personal Facebook feed about Kamala breaking the glass ceiling, becoming, the first woman vice president. And I disagree with her on a lot of issues. I do, right? Look at her jokes that she's made about poor people being put in jail and then the California system using them to make things. Basically slavery in the U.S., in my opinion, is what's going on in our prison systems. Another issue to be discussed some other time. But it doesn't start and stop there with my disagreements with Kamala Harris. But here's the deal. It is important that children and adults see people that look like them, see people that resemble them, see people that they can find resemblance in these high positions of authority. Me as a little kid in Kentucky, like, I wanted heroes that were like me. Like, I can remember like looking at the list of governors of Kentucky, and I was in fourth grade taking Kentucky history and thinking, man, I really wish there had been a Fancher on that list. That would have been so cool to see that, right? I didn't even think until like probably a couple years ago, at least they were all white dudes, right? And I didn't even think about that, right? Because I'm a white dude, so I didn't see it. Like, there's my own blindness there, right? But I think there's some value in seeing people do the things that you dream of. I think that you could see that. I think that's important, and I'm not really sure how to put it into words so that I can garner more support for that. But I just feel like it is. I talk to my students and I ask them, who are their heroes? That was a question I ask every class on Friday. Very few of them had heroes that are worth mentioning here. And I had heroes. I did. I had heroes. I had presidents I wanted to be like. I had business leaders I wanted to be like. And And so it's really, really sad that these kids are growing up in a world of no heroes. And they're the ones that they did mention were Pablo Escobar and rappers and things of that nature. And those guys look like them. And I'm being silent so it'll hang there for a little bit. And so I celebrate Kamala being elected because she's a woman. I celebrate Kamala because she has a background that's different than mine, and I think that's important. I also think that there are people with brown skin who think like me, and I'd love to see them get elected. I also think that there are women out there that think like me, and I'd love to see them get elected. And and hopefully they will. Hopefully my side will win some elections eventually. That'd be great. But until then, I'm going to choose to look on the positive side. I'm going to choose to say, hey, it's good. Because now there are people, like there was a little girl I saw wearing a t-shirt, and the t-shirt said, "My VP looks like me." And she was a mixed race child. I don't know. It's hard to tell anymore about like what people's backgrounds are by just looking at them. You definitely can't judge a book by its cover. And so shame on us when we do, but we do. And so, but the fact of the matter is that little girl didn't have blonde hair and didn't have blue eyes. And she had something to be proud of. And thank God she did, And so I think we need to get back we can all celebrate the fact that now a woman has been vice president, and someday, God willing, a woman will be president, and that I look forward to it. I do. I hope that she's a libertarian. I do. I hope that she is. And so I'm of the belief that we need to argue. We need to get back to arguing about principles and values and things of that nature. And we can talk about those, and we can celebrate the little wins for society in general, without giving up our own personal values. Heckner thinks that Harris will be president. Whoo, man. You trying to fire up some people? If you think that's right, give it a thumbs up right now. Let's see how many thumbs up we get on that. If you think Harris will be president one day, give it a thumbs up. I don't think so. But then, I don't know. So there's a lot of people that think that Biden is simply a placeholder, that he won't serve his full 4 years. I'm not sure about that. I've been impressed with how Biden has handled this so far. He's been very busy with executive orders. Not my favorite way to govern, and shouldn't be yours either. And we can talk about executive orders sometime. But so far, his speeches and things of that nature do not seem to be a man that is struggling from dementia. And so, I pray for him. I pray for his health. I pray for his heart, which I think is what we really need to do. Like, we need to pray for our leaders' hearts, right? And that they can find love and not hate as they, push their own rhetoric forward. It's important that we all pray for a little more love right now, because that's really what we need. We need a little bit more love. And I was telling someone, like, some people are worried that all we're seeing is a rising of tensions. And I don't know if you guys have ever watched Fear and Loathing with Johnny Depp, right? Las Vegas. He plays Hunter S. Thompson. And there's this part where Hunter S. Thompson is talking, and he says that the 60s were a time that everyone thought change was coming. That all the things were going to go away, all the old were going to go away, and we're going to have these brand new things. And he said it was like a wave that crashed and then went back to the ocean, that it came real far, but then it went away. And I feel like the same thing with you're going to see with the Trump push, the thing, the riots and the anger. I think that it's a wave. It has come, it has crashed, and it's going back the other direction now. But that doesn't solve any of the problems. Those problems are still there, and another wave will come eventually, right? And some argue that the wave will be bigger. Some say it'll be smaller. I don't know, but I do feel like things are going to start to recede a bit for a little while before we see it again. And so rest easy. Pray for your leaders. Pray for the people. Pray for your enemies. It's really important. It is. And so I encourage all you guys to do that out there. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Facebook. Thank you, YouTube. Please like and share the show. I've got a podcast. So if you don't catch it on Saturdays, you can always download it. Ross has real quick, a couple more questions coming in on Facebook I got to address. Let's see. Will Trump join the Constitution Party? I don't know. Trump is holding his cards close to his vest right now, as he should, right? Because he's got, next week, the papers, Pelosi has said she's going to deliver the papers to the Senate. And I think that will determine Trump's future, right? If he is truly impeached and confirmed by the Senate, and there goes his political career. And so it'll be interesting to see how that goes down. I think that if Trump, the idea of starting a third party, fourth party, fifth party, the idea of starting a party, you will soon see that the Republicans and Democrats have stacked the deck in such a manner that it's impossible for a party to make any significant change. And so I don't see him starting another party. I think as soon as he looks into it, he'll go the Ron Paul route, right? Ron Paul, longtime libertarian, said, why on earth would I get into that car when I got a Corvette sitting right here? So I'm going to run as a Republican. And thank God he did, because when Ron Paul decided to run for president, it opened up a new world to me, and I'm excited about that. Let's see here. Will it go to the Supreme Court since it's not a sitting president? Chris on Facebook, I think it should, right? So it's an interesting question. He's not a sitting president. What does it matter if they confirm the impeachment or not? It's an interesting question. And so, so it probably should go to the Supreme Court. If it is confirmed, I'm not sure the votes are there personally. I would not want to be a senator that votes as a Republican to confirm an impeachment on a non-sitting Republican, personally. And my feeling all along, and a lot of people on the left don't agree with me on this, is that Biden needs to take some pages from Gerald Ford's book. Gerald Ford came in and pardoned Nixon. And so Nixon went away, right? He rode off in the sunset, went away. I don't think Trump is willing to go away, but if he would, what would be best for our country, in my opinion, is for him to ride off in the sunset, right? Is for him to go to Mar-a-Lago and hang out down there and enjoy his last years on earth there. Trump is no Nixon. He sounded a lot like him when he was running for office. And it sounded a lot like him when he was in office. So I don't know. He seems to be the law and order president. But maybe Nixon supporters aren't Trump supporters, right? They aren't the same. That's the difference, really. It's not. I don't see a lot of difference in Nixon and Trump as much as I see the difference in the supporters. But that's an opinion, not a fact. And so, and probably an easily turned over fact. Sometimes I tell my students when I'm sharing something with them, I'm like, look, my ideas are my ideas that I've come up with over that I'm teaching that I've come up with over the years. And so I want you guys to get your crowbars out and try to pry up my ideas and turn them over, before you make them your own. Try to move them, try to change, make sure that they are solid. And so that idea is probably not very solid, would be my guess, but because I just came up with it on the fly. Everyone needs to move on. It would be best for the country if Trump moved on, retired, and if Biden showed some peace, extended the hand of peace here with a pardon, and we just moved on. Be the best thing ever, but I don't think that's what we'll get. Until next week. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you so much for your questions, your comments. It makes the show much more enjoyable. Please go out there and like my show. Please share it. Please get people. My goal with this show is to educate people about these ideas and try to do it from a spot of in the middle. Try to do it from a spot that's trying to bring us back together. That's my goal. And if that's your goal, then please do it by sharing the show. Please do it in your post. And remember, pray for our leaders and pray for yourself and pray for your friends and pray for your enemies. Have a good one, guys. let's finish the show out. Should have had this ready to go. Boom. Maybe.
You've been listening to the Middle Ground Podcast, hosted by Answer Fancher. Finally, a political podcast that isn't left or right. It's right down the middle. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and tell a friend or two. That would help also. Coming to you from Middle Tennessee with a political view right down the middle. You've been listening to the Middle Ground Podcast. See you soon.